All right, it's here. It's hot off the press, and it's the Anbernic RG476H. This actually just arrived on my doorstep yesterday from Anbernic. They did send me this unit for review purposes, but they don't get to see the video. They're not paying me. I only get the value of this device from them. And yeah, they don't get to see this video before it goes live. So honest opinions, try to consider the price as best as I can when talking about the device today. It just arrived yesterday, and I had about 2 hours, a good chunk last night, to play some games on it, tinker around, get it all set up, and experience the device. So I think I've formed a decent initial impression. This isn't a long-term review, and opinions may change over time, but I wanted to get this out before the device officially launches. It does go on pre-sale or sale starting tomorrow, I believe, or maybe sometime late tonight, depending on what part of the world you're in. It is going to be on sale for $150 initially, and then it's going to go up to $165 in the US. I can't tell what the shipping is yet because it's not on the site. I'm going to guess it's like $25, so your real out of the door cost is going to be around $175 shipped, and then that goes up another $15 after the first couple days of discount on the device. So yeah, I wanted to get this video to you guys before that initial price was up so you could maybe decide to buy it while you still can get that good price based on the thoughts today, if they help you out. But of course, you don't have to FOMO and rush to the next device. So don't rush and buy it just to save that $15 if you're not sure about it. So let's continue jumping right in and talk about the device a little bit and what it is, what it isn't. So it is the same screen that we saw on the RG477M, and that is probably one of the biggest highlights of this device today, which is that 4.7-inch 1280 by 960 resolution, 120 hertz LTPS display. It's not OLED, but it is quite colorful, and it is very crisp at that resolution. And 4.7 inches is really an awesome size for a 4.3 handheld. Like, I don't even think I would want much bigger than this for a lot of these retro titles. They would just kind of start looking silly. I don't really like playing these kinds of games on a 7-inch PC handheld just because of how large they are. But you know, those 3.5-inch, tried and true screens are a bit small these days, so it's nice to see that. As far as the CPU, we've got the Unisoc T820, which we've seen before in the RG406 series, the 406H and 406V, as well as the RG556. And that CPU is good enough for all of your classic retro systems. It's going to be perfectly fine up to Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast and PSP. Those are going to run totally fine, no issues. Where you're going to start running into issues is with GameCube and PlayStation 2. For PlayStation 2, some games won't even run at 1x, some will run at 1x, some might run at 2x if they're easier to run games, but it is going to be more limited there. The GameCube, you will probably find more titles that can run at 2x and a lot that can run at 1x, but there still may be a few challenging titles in there that won't run well. And that's sort of a shame because we get this super high resolution screen, but can't really push the pixels to it. The 477M CPU made a little bit more sense with this screen, but it was also like twice as expensive nearly as this model. So for people that didn't need those extra systems, this console I think makes a lot of sense compared to the 477M. Aside from those mainline specs, we do get 8 gigabytes of RAM and 120 gigabytes of storage, which is pretty standard and plenty for any of the systems that this is going to play. Besides the black here, this also comes in a retro gray color and a kind of indigo-ish, purplish GameCube type color scheme. Personally, I think I actually am glad that they sent me the black model because the bezels do kind of disappear a little bit with this all glass front device. And yeah, you may have already seen that as well, but look how shiny this thing gets when it's pointed towards my light. It is very shiny. I'm not in the camp of hating glass fronts, but some people despise them, so take that as you will. It does pick up, hairs and dust specks and stuff more noticeably than plastic, so you might see me dusting it off a few times during this video. That said, let's just kind of jump into a tour of the device and see what it has to offer. On the top here, we've got pretty standard stuff. We've got our bumper, and we've got analog triggers. Interestingly, the metal version with the more powerful CPU had digital inline triggers. I'm assuming that has to do with maybe the CNC metal chassis and not being able to fit the buttons properly in there. I don't know. I'm sure they could have figured out if they really wanted to, but they didn't. So we get analog triggers on the less powerful device. Sort of a confusing choice, but it is what it is. We've got our power button, our volume buttons, power indicator, our fan exhaust, and then our other bumper and trigger. Across the bottom, we've got our little speaker slits, if you'll call them that. Not much of an outlet there. Our micro SD card slot, USB-C, and headphone jack. And I'm going to pause here for a second to talk about the micro SD card slot. And let me get a close-up here. I don't know if you can tell, but it's slightly ajar. Let me get like a profile shot here. Let's see if I can get that in focus. So right here with the micro SD, it's not flush. It's not closed all the way. And it's not for lack of trying. You know, I can pop this off and you see I've got a card in there. So now if I pop my SD card out, take that out for a second and pop this back on, then suddenly it's totally flush and doesn't have any issue staying closed. Pop that open and put this card in, close it, and look at that. Now it doesn't stay closed all the way. It seems like it latches on this side, and this side is just like a little plastic nubbin that kind of holds it in, and it doesn't latch, so I don't know. I don't think the SD card is necessarily pushing that hard, but I don't know. Maybe there's something on the back side of this that needs to be kind of trimmed down to fit in there. Maybe Anbernic will fix this for the retail units, but as far as I'm concerned right now, that doesn't sit flush all the way. I think Retro Game Core noticed the same issue on his unit as well, so hopefully that is something that gets remedied on later production units. Continuing our tour, on the right side we've got nothing, on the left side we've got nothing, and then on the back we've got our intake for the fan, very similar to the 477 here, except I think this doesn't have a little screen, which that one had, and people complained about a whiny fan on the 477, so maybe they learned from that, and that's why we don't see that little dust screen in there anymore. And then as far as just the general fit and finish, I do kind of like it. It has that all glass glossy front, which is going to be divisive, but it does look pretty premium and it feels pretty nice. And on the back, we've got nice plastics. This black, I don't know, you can see a day of play here. There's some very light smudging, but it's certainly not the smudgiest black plastic I've ever seen. And it feels relatively well built. I don't have too concerns. It's not rattly. It's not cheap feeling or anything like that. You know, as far as how that sits in your hand, well, there is kind of a harder edge on the front and a rounded edge on the back. And later I'll show some comparison footage with the RG477M. And you'll notice that the 477M is less rounded on the back, but still a little bit more rounded on the front. So it feels a little bit better against the palm of your hands, but I would say that the 476H feels better overall to hold. And part of that is because we have these trigger bumps, and I find myself resting my middle finger against that one, holding it, and that actually makes it quite comfortable to hold and play. So when that's in the hand, it fits pretty much just right. So for D-pad and face button gaming, it feels really good, I would say. I think that because of the extra height, because of the rounded backs, and this little lip to put your finger on over here, it feels overall really nice to play for D-pad gaming. You know, joystick gaming is going to be a little bit more compromised because they're down here. You do have to pivot a little bit, maybe pivot your hands out, bring your thumbs down a little bit. It's going to be slightly less optimal. But based on the power profile of this device, I don't really see that being a huge issue. In fact, more of an issue on the 477M since it can handle PS2, GameCube, Switch, whereas this one can't as well. So you're probably less often going to be using the sticks. Now, there's still Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, PSP that you'll use this left stick, and it's not terrible to use the left stick. You know, it's worse with dual sticks. I still say it's relatively comfortable. I don't think it's that bad, but it's not perfect. Again, D-pad gaming, great. So let's go ahead and just pivot straight into talking about those controls. D-pad here, I'm not getting any false diagonals, but it's still relatively easy to roll. So it's a nice, comfortable D-pad, membrane style, soft, squishy, silent. I really enjoy that. Again, the same applies for the buttons here. They are very quiet. Like probably among some of the quietest face buttons I've seen on a device recently, which I really enjoy. They are decently sized. They're not huge, but they're not tiny either, so they feel good on my thumb. Responsive, membrane feel. I really enjoy the controls on this. It's pretty much the same as the 477M, if maybe even a little bit quieter since it's got plastics instead of metal on there. And then, yeah, the joysticks, a little bit harder to get to, but they are quite accurate. There's no cardinal snapping. There's a little bit of a dead zone here, but we can turn that off in the settings if we want to, easily accessible. And they really kind of go everywhere you want them to do. I mean, these are these kind of standard sticks that we're seeing on a lot of Anbernic stuff lately, same kind of sticks that Retroid and AYN use, so all your existing caps will work with those. And yeah, they're pretty smooth, nice, better than a Switch joystick. I really have largely no complaints about using them on the device. As far as the other analog inputs go, we do have our triggers, and those are also pretty nice and smooth. As you can see, a nice range of motion there. They don't have a huge travel, but it is pretty smooth, and there's a nice resistance. It's actually kind of a buttery smooth resistance when I press this. It doesn't grind at all. It's got nice tension against my fingers. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the triggers on this device, which kind of makes it even more upsetting that they didn't use them on the 477M. Who knows? This is Anbernic. They pump out a lot of products. Maybe we'll get a 477H? I don't know. The body of this with the internals of the 477M would kind of be awesome, but maybe a little bit pricey. Anyway, triggers are good. And then kind of one thing that I don't love is maybe just the bumpers. They are a little clicky. But it's sort of a trend I've seen on most handhelds these days is we do get pretty clicky bumpers. It's just sort of a little jarring to go from the quiet face buttons to the noisy bumpers. But it is what it is. I don't absolutely hate them, but I do wish they were a little bit quieter on the bumpers. The rest of the inputs, super good. We already talked about the ergonomics. This all feels really good in the hand for D-pad gaming, so let's keep moving on and talking about the rest of my thoughts on the device. So let's talk about performance on this device. I've covered this before in my 406H video. This is a known quantity, but I want to do a quick recap of what this can and can't do. I'm going to start at the top and work my way back down as far as what this can and can't do. Okay, so taking a look at performance now, we're going to start with the hardest to run systems. I've got PS2 pulled up here, and as you may be able to see, oh man, some slowdowns. This is God of War 2, kind of a notoriously somewhat challenging to run game for PlayStation 2, and I will typically be around 40 or 50 frames per second, but then as you can see now, I'm really chunking down to some low frames per second. So this is not the handheld you want to run your PS2 library. And again, this is only at 1x right now. I'm not even upscaling the resolution of the console. Let's try another PS2 game and see if we can get a little bit more out of it here. Okay, so now we got Ratchet & Clank going commando, and as you can see, this game is running much better than God of War 2 was. Again, we're still at a 1x resolution here, but largely I am getting 60 frames per second. I will say that as I was kind of running through this level here and, you know, like shooting this enemy and they explode, then yeah, it kind of dropped down to like 30 for a quick second there. Kind of just depends on how many particles and stuff are on screen. So it's still not a smooth 60, but it's playable if you really want to get something in a pinch. But again, PS2, not the forte of this handheld, so I would not buy this if PS2 was your main goal. So let's walk it back down a little bit and let's check out GameCube with Dolphin Emulator. So just to show you real quick, I'm running Dolphin GameCube at 2x resolution, 1280 by 1056, which is coincidentally just about the same resolution as this screen, slightly taller, same width, so we don't need more than 2x. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like in game, pulling up Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 here. So one thing I noticed when I was playing this last night is that 2x, we are kind of right on the money as far as performance. Like it is occasionally slowing down to like a 90% speed on the performance, but overall it's just barely maintaining that 60, which goes to say that yes, we could be playing this at 1x without too much issue, but I just wanted to kind of push a little bit and see what kind of performance we could get out of the chip for GameCube. And yes, we're in max performance mode right now, 2x GameCube, mostly maintaining 100%, not the hardest game to run though, so you are gonna have to drop down to 1x for some things here. So now that we know what systems don't run great, let's start talking about the systems that do run pretty well. And we're starting out with PSP. I'm running this at a 3x native resolution. Now this isn't a 16:9 screen, but I do find that since it's 4.7 inches, it's pretty generous screen area. In fact, I think it's pretty close to what a PSP would have been as far as actual viewable area. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. And yes, we're playing Burnout on PSP and really no problem maintaining the native 30 frames per second of this game at a 3x resolution here. And yeah, it's pretty fun to play PSP on here. And as you'll notice, the bezels are not particularly bad. Like, I mean, we'd see this little frame rate here, but if we try to get close up here, you know, and get the lighting on it, you can see a little bit right here where the edge of the glass overlay is and the screen starts. But in a brightly lit environment, the bezels are almost invisible. In fact, let's just turn off the studio lights and take a look at what that looks like with a darker environment. I'm gonna just crank the screen brightness past what it should be for the camera right now. You'll notice it's blown out as far as the actual game, but we still don't really see the bezels too badly on the screen here. In person, I can see them a little easier than the camera is picking up, but overall, it actually looks pretty good, I think, for 16:9 content. So PSP is actually a pretty good fit for this handheld. Let me turn that brightness back down so that it looks good on the camera here and more like what I'm seeing in the room. So yeah, the bezels haven't really bothered me. So playing 3.2 content like Game Boy Advance, 16:9 like PSP, still going to look pretty big on this screen. And since the bezels are relatively narrow as it is, it just kind of looks like a chunkier bezel when you're playing that kind of content. All right, so as we move down, we're now fully in the realm of games that are going to run A-OK, no problems whatsoever on the system. I've got Sega Rally for Dreamcast here, and I'm using the Redream emulator at 1280 by 960 resolution, which perfectly matches the resolution of this screen, so it's going to look nice and crispy. Let's get into a race and take a look. So here we are with Dreamcast, an excellent fit for this console. Excuse my poor driving here, but we get analog controls, which is perfect for Dreamcast. This game supports the analog triggers for brakes and gas, and we get an analog joystick down here. So for a lot of Dreamcast games, this is actually sort of a dream handheld, if you will. It really plays them well, fully upscaled resolution, great performance, and pretty good controls, and a beautiful screen for the system. 4.3 at 4.7 inches really looks quite good for the systems that run well. So yeah, Dreamcast is a pretty good match here. So let's move on to some other things. So that's enough about systems that can run or can't run. At this point, we're completely in the territory of everything runs just fine. So I wanted to show off some Super Nintendo here and what that looks like on the screen. As you can see, we are quite bright and vivid on the screen here. And yeah, it looks great. Let's see if we can get a bit of more of a close-up at just how crisp, colorful, and clean motion with this 120 hertz frame. There's no motion blur or anything like that. And we can turn on black frame insertion and get that sort of CRT-esque effect with improved motion clarity. I'm not going to show that on video just because it will kind of strobe and look weird and not look at all like it does in person, but just take my word for it that it is possible. So let's actually take a look at shaders on this screen real quick. And let's load up a CRT preset. I'm going to go with the CRT Geom, which is one I like to throw on for some testing here. And we'll get back into the game. And yes, as you can see here, it does some weird things with the frames per second at first, but this will stabilize after just a second to 60 frames per second. And yeah, now we've got that kind of cool CRT look. Get that nice and close in there, and you can see all those little scan lines and kind of that blur to the pixel, and it makes it look pretty good. I don't necessarily love the rounded shape of Geom here, and we can turn that off if we want to and just use the CRT effect. All we got to do is go into our shaders menu, and then we're going to go down to shader parameters, and then we're going to turn the curvature off. And we'll back out and get back into the game. And now we have that CRT. We still got the rounded corners, but it's not doing like the kind of geometric bulge, which, you know, this isn't a CRT TV. We don't really need to have that bulge. Sounds inappropriate, but yeah, it looks really good with shaders, and we have the power to run shaders here. You know, I don't think I've released the video yet at the time of this coming out, but I looked at the RP Classic, and it has a GPU that can run things, but when you start to add shaders, it falls apart. It actually could not run CRT Geom on Super Nintendo on the Retroid Pocket Classic, so I think that the chipset in here makes sense for being able to run shaders and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't make sense for PlayStation 2, as we've already discussed. So that kind of sums up what the games look like on here. So let's wrap it up, give a few last opinions, talk about the screen and the audio, and then just kind of sum up who this is for and who it's not for. All right, let's just take a quick listen to the audio. So you may have not picked up on the mic there. It is a little bit tinny on the audio. It doesn't sound awful, but for certain high-pitched frequencies, like the slashing of my sword here, it does get kind of a little bit annoying. So I don't know. Honestly, lately, I've just sort of been saying it is what it is for sound on these handhelds, and I know that's kind of dismissive and we can do better. I just haven't seen very many handhelds that do actually do better yet. So it's hard to give a handheld a knock for audio when they're all kind of just mediocre. And then while we're here playing this game, let's just take a look at the screen. Colorful game, I like to take a look. And yes, as you can see, it's quite crisp and beautiful. I've already talked about this enough, I think. But yeah, screen is definitely the best part of this handheld. Nothing is new there since we looked at the 477M not that long ago. So to sum up, who should buy this handheld? Who shouldn't buy this handheld? Do I like it? Do I not like it? I think the answer first is yes, I like this handheld. I think it's pretty cool, but let's think about the price tag and what that gets us here. $175 shipped, maybe it's less, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but at least $150, where do we sit? Yes, for $50 more, you could get something like the Retroid Pocket 5, which is going to have a bit better performance, being able to play PlayStation 2 and GameCube much more reliably at a 2x upscale, and you get an OLED screen. However, I will almost say that I don't think that the Retroid Pocket 5 screen is necessarily better. This is taller and bigger for 4.3 retro content, so if you're going to play stuff like Super Nintendo, Dreamcast, Saturn, whatever, all those things, they're going to be bigger on this than the Retroid Pocket 5. It's only going to really win out for stuff like PSP or widescreen hacks, Switch emulation, that kind of stuff. I would also actually say that despite this being a slab, I find this more comfortable than the Retroid Pocket 5 for a couple reasons. It's taller and slimmer, so it's easier to just simply sandwich this for the grip in my fingers, and that doesn't bother me at all. And then also, it gives me leverage to pull the triggers. On the Retroid Pocket 5, I felt like I was fighting it to pull the triggers. I didn't have a good enough grip. I don't know what it is about the shape of that. Yes, you can get the TPU grip for the Retroid Pocket 5, but that brings up the cost. And I don't really like adding clunky extras to a handheld if I can avoid it. Overall, I think this is actually quite comfortable for how flat it is. Because it is larger, it provides you more to grip than a small handheld. As a quick size reference, let me just show you here next to my iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's sort of in the same size category, just a little bit bigger. So pocketable, I don't know. It's a little large for a pocket, but you could fit it if your pants have a generous pocket size. Okay, so I filmed this footage earlier of the 477M and the 476H next to each other. Just gonna let that roll in the background as I chat a little bit about it. I touched on it in other parts of my reviews today, but it's a little bit more rounded on the back on the 476H, but a harder edge on the front as compared to the 477. But since it's lighter, I don't really feel like the hard glass edge on the front is uncomfortable or anything like that. But overall, these are near identical. They have pretty much the exact same size chassis. They've got the same screen. They got most of the same buttons other than the triggers and bumpers. So it's really going to come down to price and performance and whether you like metal or not when you pick between these two handhelds. But just wanted to give you guys a quick look that, yeah, they are basically identical other than a few small changes in the materials and rounding of the edges. There are cheaper things out there, but you're definitely going to sacrifice on screen. You could get something like the older RG476H used. It's going to have a bit smaller screen. It'll have joystick top, so if you're playing D-pad games, that's sort of a downgrade. And this screen is definitely better, although that screen isn't bad. It's 100% better than anything with 3.5-inch screen, although you can get those for cheaper. But I would pick this over something like the Retroid Pocket 2S in a heartbeat, I think, if they were close enough in price. Over the 477M, well, if you're going to play GameCube and PS2, then the 477M is a bit more of a no-brainer, although you lose the analog triggers and it's heavier and the fan is potentially noisier, and it costs like $100+ more. So, I mean, at that point, there's probably other better options situated price-wise. But yeah, I don't know. I might be rambling a little bit here, but I just kind of want to give you all of my thoughts about whether this value is worth it. Since I didn't pay for it, I just want to picture in my mind, would I go out and spend $150 on this? And I think the answer is that I might. I really just appreciate this big screen size, and I do really like Anbernic's face buttons and D-pad. So for retro gaming, I think this is going to kind of become my main device right now if I want to pick up anything below PlayStation 2 and GameCube. If I want to play some Dreamcast, if I want to play some Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, this is the device I'm going to go to right now. There are some other options out there like the Pocket Ace, which is actually a very similar size device. It's almost the exact same width. The screen is almost the exact same width, but it's slightly shorter due to being 3.2, which makes the whole device shorter as well. Now that essentially has the equivalent of an 8 Gen 2 in it, so it's going to be able to play Switch, modern Android games, GameCube, PS2, all those things that this can't. But you're then like looking at a $340 base introductory price for that. So almost $200 more than this. Not worth it if you don't need to, if you just want to play Game Boy Advance or something like that, then I would 100% pick this over the Ayaneo Pocket Ace, but that's just me. So yeah, I think it's a well-positioned device. I think it's not the worst price Anbernic has had in recent times. If it was like $30 cheaper, I would 100% be like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. At $150, there's a bit more consideration. But overall, I think that it is a solid handheld for what it offers. I do hope to see a version with a slightly more powerful chip in it so we can get more GameCube out of it. But I don't know. Anbernic kind of always seems to just throw a bunch of features in a bag and pull out random ones and combine them to make a handheld. So maybe one of these days they'll give me a 10 out of 10. As it stands, this is like an 8 out of 10 handheld. So help me out. There's a link in the description. If you do want to pre-order one of these or order one of these through Anbernic, use my link if you can, and that helps me out. I get a few % of the sale price, which helps me continue making these videos and buying other handhelds to review for you. Got this one for free, but I get a lot of them I have to pay for myself. You don't have to use the affiliate link, but just consider it. Also consider liking and subscribing to help my channel grow, get more viewers, get more eyes on this. I can review more handhelds for you. I think it's beneficial for everyone. That all being said, have a good one. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend, or whenever you're watching this, enjoy your day. And let me know in the comments if you agree with me, if you think that this is finally a home run for Anbernic, or if it's yet another device that is just short of wanting to buy it.